Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. Today, we are joined by a man whose music is practically the DNA of Western sound. For those who may somehow not know who you are, who are you?
Hello, Calvin. I am Johann Sebastian Bach, a humble keyboardist and composer. I spent my life in service to the church and the courts, trying to find the mathematical perfection in music to the glory of God.
It is an absolute honor to have you here. Let's start at the very beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born on March 31st, 1685, in the beautiful town of Eisenach, in the heart of Thuringia.
And what was your given name at birth?
My name was Johann Sebastian Bach.
Is there a story behind your birth name?
In my family, Johann was almost a requirement. My father was Johann Ambrosius, and nearly all my uncles and brothers shared the name. It was like a badge of our musical guild. Sebastian was chosen from my godfather, a dear friend of the family.
What was your hometown like growing up?
Eisenach was a vibrant place, tucked near the Thuringian forest. It was filled with the sounds of bells and town pipers. It was a town of faith and music, the very place where Martin Luther had gone to school.
What was your family life like?
Music was the air we breathed. My father was the director of the town musicians, and he taught me the violin and harpsichord. However, life turned quite difficult early on. I lost both of my parents by the time I was 10. I went to live with my eldest brother, Johann Christoph, who was an organist. He was strict, but he gave me the foundation I needed.
What kind of kid were you?
I was curious, perhaps a bit too curious for my own good. I had a sharp mind for Latin and theology, but my heart was always at the keyboard. I was determined. If I wanted to learn a piece of music, I would do anything to get my hands on it.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
After losing my parents, my biggest fear was being unable to provide for myself or being silenced. I feared a life where I couldn't create or serve through my music.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
I always knew I would be a musician. In the Bach family, it was the family trade, much like being a baker or a blacksmith. I dreamed of mastering the organ, the king of instruments.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
I loved singing in the choir. We would go from door to door in the corrende to earn a bit of money. I also had a great passion for studying the structure of languages, which I think helped me understand the language of music later on.
What was your first job?
My first real post was as a court musician in the chapel of Duke Johann Ernst in Weimar. I was just a teenager, mostly playing the violin, but it was my foot in the door.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
I don't know if I felt quote-unquote different, but I felt a different level of drive. When I was a boy, my brother locked away a manuscript of music I desperately wanted to study. I spent 6 months sneaking it out at night, copying it by the light of the moon. I think that was when I realized my hunger for music was a bit more intense than most.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
Walking to Lübeck. I was an organist at Arnstadt, and I asked for a few weeks of leave to go hear the great Dietrich Buxtehude play. I ended up walking over 250 miles each way. I stayed much longer than I was supposed to, and that experience completely transformed how I understood the organ. It got me in trouble with my employers, but it made me the composer I became.
What was your biggest break?
Getting the position of Thomas Cantor in Leipzig. It was a massive responsibility, overseeing the music for the city's main churches and the school. It was where I produced my greatest works, like the Passions.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
I often clashed with authority. I was young and sometimes a bit stubborn. I once got into a street fight with a bassoonist I called Greenhorn, and I even spent a few weeks in jail in Weimar because I wanted to quit my job for a better one.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Never music itself. I may have wanted to quit specific jobs where the wine was sour and the choir was out of tune, but music was my life's breath.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
Work. I used to say I was obliged to be industrious. I rose early, studied the works of others, and wrote constantly. Coffee was also a great companion. I even wrote a cantata about it.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
Perhaps a teacher or a scholar of theology. But honestly, I cannot imagine a world where I am not touching keys or strings.
What was your life like before fame?
I was a hardworking family man. I had many children to feed, 20 in total over my 2 marriages. Life was a constant cycle of teaching, rehearsing, and writing out parts by candlelight.
How did relationships change after success?
I was always a family man first. My sons, like Carl Philipp Emanuel and Johann Christian, became famous in their own right. Success meant I could provide for them and ensure they had the best musical education.
Did fame bring happiness?
Happiness came from a well-executed fugue and a happy family. Fame was secondary. I was often more famous as a performer than as a composer during my life.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The politics! The more responsibility you have, the more people try to tell you how to do your job. I spent a lot of time writing letters to the city council complaining about the lack of funding for my musicians.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
Some thought I was too old-fashioned toward the end of my life. They wanted simpler, lighter music. They called my work turgid or too complex. I just saw it as being thorough.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People often think of me as a very stern, statue-like figure. But I loved a good joke, a good pipe, and a large glass of beer or brandy with friends.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong and how did you handle it?
When I returned from a trip with Prince Leopold, I discovered my first wife, Maria Barbara, had died and been buried while I was away. It was devastating. I leaned on my faith and my music to carry me through that dark valley.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
My brother for taking me in, and Buxtehude for showing me what was possible. But above all, the works of the Italian masters like Vivaldi taught me so much about melody and form.
What was life like in your final years?
I was losing my sight. It was a great trial. I underwent surgeries that unfortunately made things worse, leaving me completely blind at the end. But I continued to compose by dictation.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was working on the art of fugue. I wanted to show every possible way a single theme could be transformed. I didn't quite finish the final piece, but I think the point was made.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
I passed away in Leipzig on July 28, 1750. I was 65 years old. My health had declined after those failed eye surgeries.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was an expert at testing organs. I would pull out all the stops and say, I must know if the instrument has good lungs. I would play so loudly the walls would shake.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
Oh, that I was a dry mathematical hermit. I had 20 children and a very busy social life. I was far from a hermit.
What was your most unique habit?
I would often rework my own music and the music of others. I never saw a piece of music as finished if I could find a way to make it better or use it for a different occasion.
What was your favorite food?
I was very fond of herrings and, as I mentioned, my coffee.
What was your favorite book?
My Bible and the theological writings of Abraham Kalov. I kept extensive notes in the margins.
Did you have any known rivalries?
There was a famous duel scheduled in Dresden against a French organist named Louis Marchand. But when he heard me practicing the day before, he realized he was outmatched and fled the city before the competition could even start.
What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
Probably the time I had to play for King Frederick the Great. He gave me a theme that was nearly impossible to turn into a fugue, just to see if I could do it. I did it on the spot. I think his face was quite a sight.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
Do not chase the praise of men. It is fleeting. Seek the perfection of your craft and do everything to the best of your ability. If you work hard, the music will speak for itself.
Johann, this has been truly enlightening. Before we sign off, do you have any closing remarks about the stories you shared today for our listeners?
Only that music is a gift meant to refresh the soul. I am so happy that my notes are still being played and that I could share a bit of my heart with you today. Thank you, Calvin, for this wonderful invitation.
That was the legendary Johann Sebastian Bach. From walking hundreds of miles for a concert to being a father of 20, his life was as complex and beautiful as one of his fugues. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod